Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of the CEO Story. And we've got a real spiritual awakening going on in this session. We thank you, Jennifer Hill, co-founder and CEO of Optimal Match, who's joining us, and we're digging into her insights and her journey from corporate executive into the spiritual world and kind of that different lifestyle, meeting amazing people, amazing experiences. So over to you, Jennifer. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing?
Casey, what a pleasure. As you know, I just landed yesterday afternoon in LA, and my life is one big synchronicity of miracles happening just like showing up here today.
Yeah, everything happens for a reason, and we're all on our own journey and our path. So let's kind of talk a little bit about that. Let's start right now with Optimal Match, what you're looking to do and achieve. I know you've got a lot of great things going on in the health and wellness space. And then we'll back into your experience and kind of how life has unfolded and unwound. And you've ended up in beautiful Portugal via London, via Paris. And it's just amazing journey that I think will add value to anybody listening.
Thank you, Casey. And thank you for what you've created for your listeners. I think it's so important to understand that we all learn from each other, and we never know. Like yesterday, it's going to make me tear up in the first few minutes of the show. I was at this event yesterday, and a lot of the other evolutionary leaders that I'm a group of that Deepak started and Barbara Marx Hubbard happened to be 20 minutes outside of the airport where I landed. And this woman who had seen me in all these shows came up and she said, "Jennifer, I want you to know you saved my life.
Wow.
Thank you for sharing your journey with, I've struggled my journey personally with mental health, which is what led me to form and co-found Optimal Matches. I struggled with suicidal ideation when I was very young, had 3 failed suicide attempts, and this woman came up to me and she said, "You saved my life by being so transparent about your journey. Thank you."
Holy smokes. That's so impactful, isn't it? It's like you do all of this good work all around the world for so many years as well. And then just one story of one person that you've actually impacted. But it's not just her. It's her family. It's her friends. It's her whole world that's been impacted by your transparency and kind of your journey. So let's dig into that journey a little bit because it's really interesting. So you've worked with some great thought leaders. You've already mentioned Deepak, but there's a whole host of other people as well. How did you initially get into the spiritual world? Because you come from a consulting background of a big company, and then to go from corporate person to spiritual person doesn't always happen, firstly. And then when it does, it becomes even more profound because it's just a different aura of energy around you usually. And my background is corporate person. I then ran an energy healing company with Dr. Eric Pearl at the Reconnection for a few years before I started my own business. So I had that twist of corporate person, 9 to 5, suited and booted, just like this picture, right? And then when I was awoken in the spiritual world, I didn't really believe it. And it's quite, I don't really share this story, but seeing as though we have you on, it's a great time to, because I was sat in an interview with Eric and his number 2, Jillian, and I didn't believe a word he was saying. I was like, okay, this guy wants me to run his business while he's around the world traveling, doing the seminars and the training. And I fully believed that that was his calling in life, and he believed that also, which is why he dedicated all these years to doing it. And I liked him as a person, very likable person. Eric, if you're listening, I love you. But I didn't quite understand or believe in the energy healing spirituality side of things. I'm a corporate finance guy, right? I've got logic and
Left
black
brain.
and white. Yeah, so I was like, this guy's just full of shit. And he sensed it. He sensed it. So he's like, do you believe that we're all connected? And I'm like, yes, I believe in energy, light, sound, and vibrations, and that we're all connected. So I'd passed the first test, because if I'd said no, the interview was over.
Don't pass go.
And then he's like, okay, that's good. And then he came over to this side of the table. Imagine we were having an interview here. So he came here and he's like, he put my arm out like this, and he put his hands either side of it, and he just flicked his wrist. And I kid you not, I had a full shiver going up my arm. And then he flicked it one more time, and it went all the way across my shoulder and down the other arm. And he's like, did you feel that? I'm like, yeah. He's like, that's what we do. I'm like, all right, I'm in. I believe you now. You're not just some kind of crook
Woo
trying
woo.
to... And from that moment on, I then went through the classes, I went through the training, because I never want to be that person that helps blow up the company or increase the profitability or save on the taxes, but not actually experience what they're talking about. So I read his books and I went through the full programs, and I was sat on a table. People were doing the process to me. I was doing it to other people. And I was like, I was tuned in, and it took me a while because it's not something that you click into instantly. I had to break down my barriers and kind of rebuild them up, similar to going to a gym. You're not going to get buff overnight. It takes time and practice, right? So I went through all of the events, and it was profound. It just opened my eyes. My skepticism went down, and I was allowing other things to come into my conscious and subconscious area or mind or whatever you want to call it. And from that moment on, I was just never as skeptical about things in life in general, because it was like, I was so wrong about this thing, and I shouldn't have been so close-minded all the rest of my life, just thinking, oh, it's woo-woo BS type stuff, when really he's devoted, he closed down his medical practice and he devoted his life to doing this globally, impacted hundreds of thousands of people. And it's like, it was hard. It wasn't like he was away from his family, his friends, 10 months of the year, because he's traveling around the world. And it might sound glamorous, but it's hard traveling for so long, and as you well know. So that was my first kind of inclination into energy and light and vibrations. And then I was always big with Tony Robbins, and he goes a lot about talking about states and energy. And so always had an interest in it, but nothing compared to what you've done, but really just piqued my curiosity. So can you share a little bit about your journey, about growing a business, exiting it, and then your spiritual journey, how you ended up in Portugal?
Well, I first want to acknowledge you, Casey, because I think there are a lot of people listening out there who resonate. Like, a lot of us have that little prickly sense of there's this je ne sais quoi, there's something that we can't quite put our finger on or measure scientifically. And so it appears as magic.
Yeah.
And I think for many of us, we just kind of dismiss it until one day we have some sort of metaphorical, proverbial, or literal wake-up call. And so for me, my wake-up call was being told I was a jerk. I was actually outside an airport at LAX. I was already having quite a bit of success in my early 20s. And I did one of those personal development transformational classes, right? And I showed up to that class, Casey, to prove it was a cult. Like,
so was it Landmark?
Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah,
right.
exactly. It was Landmark. Okay. So my boyfriend at the time, we'd been dating a couple months. He was one of those soapbox people. You got to do Landmark. Oh my God, it's going to change your life. Blah, 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 blah. So I'm sitting there and I was straight up, you can't make me. Okay. So this went on.
So you did enough to get in the room just to keep him quiet, but you weren't buying into it.
So I did it. The first weekend I show up. So one day I tell my boyfriend I'm doing that Landmark thing, and he's lit up like a firecracker. That's amazing. Best news ever. To prove it's a cult. And I show up day one, and there's 150 people.
Oh, it's a big group then.
Yeah, outside of LAX, like this big classroom.
Okay.
And the co-facilitator says, does anybody have any questions? Yes, ma'am, you over there in the Von bitch shirt? No joke. That's actually what what my shirt said. I wanted to be sure people knew who I was. And I didn't get it, though. At the visceral level, I didn't realize the pain I was causing myself and others. You know, there's that old silly adage, but it's not really silly. Hurt people hurt people. And I was so miserable at the time, Casey. I was bulimic. I was drinking. I was doing drugs. I'd had 3 failed suicide attempts. I hated my life.
Wow.
And yet I was still somehow successful powering through it. So I go in.
Well, successful in one area, but not so much in...
Yeah, monetarily. You know, making $100,000 a year at 23 years old, whatever it was, by some people's monetary standards, successful, right? And so the man says, yes, you. And I said, how would you respond to the fact that this, meaning the class, is a cult? And he looked at me, gave a little chuckle. He said, if it is a cult, it's the best damn cult you'll ever join.
Oh, fantastic. He disarmed you instantly.
Oh, my God. I sat there, though, stewing in self-righteousness. People are getting breakthroughs in their family, in their romantic relationships, professional. And I am just sitting there in my bulimia, self-judginess, like, you have problems. I'm fine. So it culminates.
It's reflecting, right?
Of
Or
course.
deflecting, probably.
Yeah, it was just trying to not deal with the pain of decades of being a human, right?
We all have things that build up, right?
Yeah, so up until that point, I wouldn't say I was spiritual. I wasn't at all inclined. And fast forward to the end of the program, the woman who is co-facilitating, this tall Aussie woman, comes up and is sitting next to me, and now my boyfriend, who's so excited I've culminated in my completion. And she says, "Are you going to take the advanced class?" I said, "Sweetheart, darling, it was stifling enough having sat in this room the last 3 days. Do you really think I would put myself through this hell again?" Now, you have to juxtapose this against me now, 20 years later, who everyone's like, you're friends with Deepak and all these spiritual thought leaders. They can't even reconcile that in their mind. So let me continue. So she looks at my boyfriend who says, "Oh, don't get me started. It took her 8 months just to do this one." And I looked at him and I said, "This is an at-will relationship. You can leave anytime you want." And you know those moments, Casey? Did you ever see that movie with Gwyneth Paltrow, Sliding Doors?
Yeah, I think I did.
Yeah, it's like that pivotal moment where Gwyneth Paltrow either gets on the train or she doesn't, and her life takes two totally different paths. In that moment, my path totally diverged. And I said, the woman looks at me and she says, "Can I be really straight with you?" And I said, "Sure, darling, go ahead. Be really straight with me." She said, "You are a nasty thing. You are one of the most powerful women I have ever met in my life. And yet, you know what? You are like Godzilla walking through a city with a huge tail swinging behind you, knocking down buildings wherever you go. Though you know what? Those aren't buildings. Those are people whose lives you're destroying." She looked at my boyfriend and said, "Leave her. It's what she needs." And that, Casey, was the catalyst. So that catalyzed
Did
me.
he leave you?
No, he married me. As life often goes. That's how life goes. You got to love life's little synchronicities. So that catalyzed me into my spiritual growth. I then built my first company. And all along that way, I was started meditating in my early 30s. And then fast forward, somewhere in my late 30s, I sold the first company in 2018.
That was...
That was my old recruiting company.
Okay.
And I sold that to a subsidiary of Markham LLC. And then after that happened, one day I get referred to a dream coach. Did you know there's something called a dream coach?
No, I wanted to learn how to lucid dream, but I've never really figured that out. I've watched a couple of videos on it and tried to read about it, but I didn't realize there was such thing as a dream. My wife needs that. She's not sleeping very well at all.
Oh, I'm so sorry. It's painful. And so this dream coach was referred to me. It was funny. I was actually having dinner in New York with a famous actor named Michael K. Williams. And it somehow came up over dinner that he used this dream coach, he and other actors, to dream their next role into existence. I guess it's a pretty famous
Like
thing.
Laws of attraction type thing.
It's kind of like you connect your intuitive self, and then it's revealed to you in a dream what you're meant to do. So I start working with her, and I don't know what to do. I've just sold my
Is
last...
this in New York?
So I was in California and splitting my time between LA and New York.
Okay.
The company that bought me was in New York.
Okay.
So I'm now in California. I do this dream assignment. You write a dream. "Dear higher self, in a dream tonight, give me blah, blah, blah,
Oh,
blah,
this
blah."
is connecting with your subconscious while you
Exactly.
sleep. Okay. All right.
In that dream, Casey, and I had done a lot of television when I was younger. I was on MTV. My first wedding was on television. I had done a lot of TV, but I hadn't done television for years. I saw a male newscaster and several other things. So the dream coach says, "Oh, my love, you're going to be on TV." And I said, "Golly, I am not going to be on TV, girl. I just sold my company. I have a 5-year contract. It's impossible. It's not part of the future." She said, "Oh, give it 6 months." 6 months to the day, Casey, after this happened, I wound up being able to move right before COVID. It was so miraculous. I moved into a consulting role for the company that I sold. My executive vice president took over the company for me, so I didn't have to worry about it. I was offered a TV hosting gig on a new network called Awake TV and offered the opportunity to co-facilitate an interview with Deepak Chopra and Don Hoffman. And then next thing you know, I am involved with world thought leaders from around the world hosting TV shows with some of the most famous people of our time.
That's amazing. So she was right, really. Like
it
everything
was unprecedented. I couldn't have done that. Like if you had told me during that day, it was like March of 2019, I would have said it's impossible. There's no way.
Do you know a guy called Dr. Bruce
Lipton
Goldstein? He's here in LA.
No.
And he's done some stuff with Dave Newry, and I used him. And it's not. I wouldn't class him as a sleeping coach, but he helps break through at a subconscious level. I don't know if it works or not, but I'm always open to trying things after the story you just explained. So I just wondered if you knew of him, because it's similar to what you mentioned in terms of, I didn't write anything down, but as I was sleeping, I was intentional about what I was trying to break through and attract at a subconscious level, and have my subconscious spirit speak to his and kind of make it happen. Or however, I don't quite know how it works, but I was open to trying it.
Yeah, it's. I remember Deepak. I was with him in Dubai a couple of months ago, and he was sharing that actually how he writes every one of his books is he asks himself a question before bed, he goes to sleep, and he wakes up and writes the next book. The man has written 92 books now, I think.
Wow, that's amazing.
I mean, it's the power of our subconscious and our unconscious. So whether you're a business entrepreneur or whatever it is, it's about knowing that we have these capacities. And as one of my dear friends, an ex-Landmark Forum leader, retired one, taught me, it's how do we be unmessable with, right, Casey? As business owners, as being an entrepreneur, as you know, there's a lot of stuff that can mess with you. Being a CEO, being an entrepreneur.
You're a chief firefighter pretty much, right? That's what I call it a lot of the time.
Yeah, and you're humaning all day long. And the only difference, I get asked this question all the time when I'm doing interviews. What is the secret, Jen? What's the difference between 20 years ago and where you're at now? And I say that it's learning to connect to your superhuman nature. I love to use this analogy, Casey. Batman is the only superhero who is not superhuman. So what makes Batman a superhero?
It's that he's rich, right?
It's rich, but what buys him, his richness buys him, is all his super tools. He has his bat belt, he has his car. So the analogy I like to say is as we go on our path of evolving as human beings, it's like getting as many tools in our super tool belt as possible, whether it's working with dream coaches, personal development, meditation. We all have the capacity to be, as my friend Jocelyn Herman Saccio would say, unmessable with, which, by the way, I would highly recommend her for the show.
That's actually a really good point. And we can translate that into more business side of stuff as well, rather than just spiritual side. It's the team around you that is your tool belt in that case,
that's
right?
Brilliant.
Because
I love that.
Now at a business level, whether that's your ex-VP stepping up to run the previous business, or whether it's your current CFO, CPA, legal team that are of a level to get you where you are, but quite honestly, they're not really going to be at the level to get you where you want to be. You're going to constantly improve that team as your company evolves, or as you evolve as a person, spiritually, health. Again, all of these different facets of life, right, is how do you improve or add to the tool belt? And that takes some reflection first to understand, hey, I'm here and I want to be here. Who's already done it? Who can mentor me? Who can guide me on that path? And then increase the average of the 5 people that are around you, right?
I think it's a wonderful point. In fact, I will always remember one of my favorite books was Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. I mean, a classic. And I believe he references Ford, if I'm not mistaken, in that book, who says, listen, I am not the most brilliant guy in the whole wide world, but I hire the most brilliant people. And probably about 10 years ago, I remember that the people around me at that point in my life, I wasn't being challenged by. I wanted to be the best, right? You wanted to look good, and I was maybe the most influential person. And there's something to be said by leveling yourself up and challenging yourself with the way that people think, with the level that they're at. And I am so deeply grateful that every friend I have now in my life, and it's not monetary always, it could be spiritually, scientifically, mentally. My best girlfriends and I landed in LA yesterday, and we had this fabulous conversation over dinner about quantum physics and the nature of time. And that's the conversations. You move out of this reality of talking about people and things and into a reality of the nature of how we are all connected to things, and we are the creators and the magicians of life.
Well, at a quantum level, we can talk about quantum entanglement
Oh, God, I
and
love
time
that.
being a human construct all day long. I love all
For
that
sure.
stuff.
Oh my God, I love it. It's my favorite thing to talk about Deepak with.
But
or
I
talk with him.
think I totally agree with you. There's so many different levels of how, one, we are connected, but we can improve and help each other. To quote Napoleon Hill on one of his other books, The Law of Success, he talks about the mastermind group and how he visualized the mastermind that he wanted with these amazing elite people, and tries to put himself into character of them and see how they would tackle that problem together. And it's like, wow, that's a great way of thinking, right?
Are you ready for this?
Yeah, let's go.
I have a metaphysical board. My metaphysical board includes Bill Gates, Oprah Winfrey. It includes many other people. I have about 12 of them total. And I go into a meditative state and I ask for their wisdom. And no joke, I have received the deepest, most profound wisdom, because all things are energetically connected, right? So if we go into these altered meditative states, you can connect to the infinite wisdom of the universe. I will always remember I was probably my fourth or fifth interview with Deepak. I am not a quantum physicist, Casey. I have never gotten a degree in physics. And we were doing a show on special relativity. And I studied Stephen Hawking's. I was voraciously reading. He and Don Hoffman and I had this interview. And I went into my meditative state that morning, and I was like in prayer. I'm like, I can't do this interview. I am inept. I am not qualified to do an interview on special relativity this evening. And in that meditative state, I heard, ask Einstein. I was like, what? I said, I heard, go into a meditative state an hour before your interview with Deepak and Don. Ask Einstein, and he'll provide you everything you need to know about special relativity. I was skeptical. I mean, I've been spiritual, but miracles happened.
And then what did Einstein say to you?
So about an hour before, I didn't even know what to expect. I'm there. I meditate every day. I have for 10 years, and I start doing my mantra. And then I was like, Mr. Einstein.
So you're doing TM meditation then?
TM.
Okay,
I've been doing TM for about 10 years. I do at least 2 meditations every day, normally TM and one other.
Okay.
And so at that point, I'm like, Mr. Einstein, Mr. Albert Einstein, this is Jennifer Hill. Universe said to call you up for advice. And I started reverse swirling. And it turns out that there is something about that from a spiritual and scientific standpoint.
What's a reverse swirl?
So imagine you're sitting here meditating.
Yep.
My body started reverse swirling. It was like spiraling in a reverse order, and I dropped out of space and time. And next thing you know, I'm like riding beams of light with Einstein. He's explaining.
So you're a really deep meditator then, because I've tried, and I've done meditation on and off, never really mastered it, firstly, and then found that guided meditations were an easier way for me to kind of learn and kind of be still and not just be all over the place. But the levels of what you're describing is something that I've achieved with the help of a piece of equipment. So it's something called the Ajna light. And I came across it initially from Joe Rogan. And Joe had a guest on his podcast, and he was talking about this device. And it is just a gold kind of block with some lights on the bottom of it. And you lay down and you kind of have it above your forehead. And what it does, or what it's supposed to do, is activate the
Pineal
gland. And it's just a white light, just like the studio lights here. But it flashes in a way, and you're listening to binaural beats as well at the same time. And you have, just exactly as you described, flashes of light, and kind of, it's the closest thing to DMT without taking any substances, what they advertise.
Yeah, I've had that since there's one guided meditation, I'll gladly share it with you, that somebody had referred me to, and twice last year I got the formula for consciousness. So Don Hoffman, my friend who Deepak and I do shows with, he's writing a mathematical formula for consciousness. And all of a sudden I'm just sitting here, I think I was, where was I? I was in Ireland, and I'm just sitting as somebody's driving me out to this beautiful place outside of Dublin, and they get to like something about ether and balancing the throat chakra, and then boom, I'm dropped out of space and time, and I hear what's missing from all the formulas of consciousness is nothingness, and that you need to multiply nothingness times everything in order to get to consciousness. So I come out of this and I am dazed. I'm like in a hallucinatory state, dead sober, by the way. Like it's morning time. And I text Deepak. I'm like, Deepak, what's the formula for nothing? So he texts me. Then I call Don Hoffman later, and he says, Jen, you will never believe this. My mathematical formula for consciousness, you must have a probability square space, I forget what it's called in mathematics, of nothing. Otherwise, you can't get to consciousness. But that all just came out of just sitting one day meditating in a car.
And did he accept that? And did he include it in?
Well, he already had that. I mean,
Okay.
I'm not a mathematician, so I had never really gotten into the mathematics. But the fact that I'm just sitting here halfway around the world from them in Ireland, and this just downloads to me, goes back to our earlier point of what Napoleon Hill talks about. What we're all talking about is the more we can connect to our unlimited, expanded consciousness that includes all possibilities. It's like that movie, did you see Everything Everywhere All at Once?
Not yet, but I saw it won every single award going.
Oh, okay, so you got to watch it. It's about the probabilities. If you look at from a quantum physics standpoint, that right now, Casey, there is a version of you that's a ballerina. There's a version of you that's an ice skater, a football player. And when we connect to all of the infinite possibilities that exist, and you draw from those, Jean Houston is brilliant at this. You know Jean Houston, right?
Yeah.
Of course, she's phenomenal. When my husband and I got married in Portugal in 2021, peak of COVID, peak of Delta, people weren't even allowed to travel. We did this exercise from Jean Houston every day. You imagine walking through the curtains of time into the version of reality you want. Every one of our guests arrived, all 80 of them. They were all safe for all 4 days of the party, and they all got home safely, and nobody got COVID. It was magic.
It's kind of like Doctor Strange, and he's whipping up his
oh my God.
circle, and he's walking through this reality. Here's the next one. Okay, we're going here, and it's pretty much like that.
Life
right?
goals, by the way. My goal is to be Doctor Strange by the time I die. I just don't think I'm that disciplined.
One step at a time. You can do it for sure.
Yeah, that's true. Anything's possible.
So let's fast forward to now. You're in Portugal. You're enjoying the time there from London via Paris. Ended up there. And you're working now on Optimal Match, which is a health and wellness company. Can you share a little bit about the specifics of what you do? I know you got a race going on right now.
So what happened, Casey, was my passion for mental health and wellness. I spent the first 15 years of my career building the legal recruiting company. And what made us acquirable was the fact that we had unprecedentedly high retention rates and low churn rates. So because I didn't understand people, later in life I was diagnosed as being Aspian, high functioning Asperger's. And so I spent 20 years not understanding people, Casey. I was always afraid I was going to say the wrong thing, make a mistake. So this had me be hypervigilant.
Is that lack of empathy, do you think?
Lack of empathy, lack of tact, that ties back into all the stuff I used to accidentally say and not realize it was causing great harm to the people, thus the 20-year spiritual development.
Got it. Okay, now it's starting to click into play.
Yeah, so I studied job seekers for tens of thousands of job seekers, and I was always able to just match them. It was my gift. I would meet you and I would meet somebody else, like we were speaking about before we came on air. I just can
That's your superpower, right?
It is. I can intuitively see the connections. We spent 8 months turning what I bootstrapped, all of this knowledge of the tens of thousands of job seekers and clients I worked with over the years, synthesize that into an algorithm to match people. So what we figured out is that between KC and somebody else, there is a certain amount of variability that is tolerable. Okay. And if you exceed that amount of variability in a practitioner, coaching, or holistic or therapeutic relationship, you're going to create friction or an accidental adversarial relationship. So then we tested that in our marketplace. We created a marketplace with 100 practitioners from around the world. We began beta testing with the veterans, and we had unprecedented results, like veterans who had been through 30 years of therapy, PTSD management, anger management. One session with one of the people who they matched perfectly with transformed their lives. So we tested this, with an 89+% satisfaction rate over the course of a year.
So just to be clear, because I want to make sure I'm understanding it right. So you're taking people with, we're not just talking about job recruitment now, right?
No, we pivoted. So we used and again, there are applications down the road that we can there's so many different ways that we can apply this algorithm we've developed.
But the tool in the middle, or the glue that kind of brings both pieces together, is some kind of algorithm that you created over your years of experience that helps connect a person in need with an expert that can help with whatever that need is.
Yes, with a practitioner. We've found early results. It works for coaches, teachers, therapeutic relationships. And what happens is, and I've talked to many people around the world, if you're a therapist, even a traditional therapist, right? And you go to a patient and you have friction, it drains your energy. You go home, you're drained with your spouse, with your kids. The
I have
patient
a lot of friction with my spouse. That's clear.
we all are humans. And so, but even
In a
this,
good way.
this is something that even with spouses, like down the road, we might be able to tell you where there is variability, there can be pain if you're not aware of it. The moment you shine the flashlight on it, you don't want to necessarily match those people for therapy. So what we've done is we streamlined this, and it's an API that it's a SaaS model that can plug in to any marketplace. Our long-term goal is actually going to be, we're working at interviewing medical advisors right now and to start to test this medically with hospitals and clinics to get a patient-therapist mismatch is a huge issue.
The first thing my head went to is dating app or matchmaking, like not just dating to hook up, but dating for marriage type thing. Because if you can match those two together so well, and you probably have a really high success rate at life partners too, right?
Yeah, you know, we've seen early, it's been interesting because we have about just under 1,000 data points that we've been testing in our own marketplace, and we're getting ready to scale. We literally just launched our SaaS model in the last week. Our developers just finished it. So when we get to tens of thousands and millions, my brain, being Aspian, loves data. I cannot wait. I'm like, oh, I can't wait to see all the patterns in the data emerge. And so it's interesting because we have some early evidence. Many couples do seem to match algorithmically according to what we've identified. The part that's harder to discern in a couple situation, happiness. You might be happy one day, but then less happy another day. And so happiness over a long period of time.
Okay.
So that's the variability, that there is early evidence that it could be very possible that we can apply this. Our biggest focus immediately and initially is mental health. It's my passion. My grandfather, I was just messaging an angel investor who is a veteran himself yesterday. And my biggest passion is I do want to help veterans and anybody struggling with mental health. I was talking to Deepak's team earlier about I highly recommend if anybody, God forbid, is struggling with mental health, go to Deepak's website, neveralone.love. He has a great Peewee chatbot that helps people with suicide there.
And we'll put the link below to Deepak Chopra's website there.
Yeah, so I just am a huge advocate of neveralone.love because what they're doing is they're helping people who are struggling with depression, though patient-therapist mismatch has been the biggest issue in therapy since therapy came on the scene several decades ago. Because if you're mismatched, it's a drain. And it's also a drain on insurance companies. It's a drain on the people themselves. It's a drain on employers. You lose productivity. And
culture as well, right? You affect the culture of an organization if you bring the wrong person in. You can take a good culture and make it sour very, very quickly. So the importance of having the right people, but then the right people in the right seats as well, doing the right tasks so that they can excel and feel more of value to the whole organization rather than just clocking in and clocking out.
Yeah, and as we all know too, as CEOs, our accountability too is that we need to take care of ourselves. And then if we aren't good to ourselves, if you're not your highest and best, you can't support your team. And so I say that because we can truly see this revolutionizing people. It's scary, I'm not going to lie. I kind of feel like Steve Jobs, where, remember when the iPod came out, everybody's like, we didn't know we needed an iPod. We didn't know we needed millions.
Same with the iPod, it's just like, it's the next level of evolution, right, in a technological form.
Yeah, so many companies out there. There are wonderful companies out there that we'd love to plug in with, like Talkspace, BetterHelp. We're not looking to replace them. All of these other companies, they match based on what's your age, what's your religion preference.
Just a basic level.
We're looking at energetic variability based on motivating factors, and we built our algorithm from the ground up analyzing that.
So the other thing that comes to my mind as we talk through this is Cambridge Analytica. So they built this super duper AI tool that kind of made avatars out of millions of people's data sets pretty much, and then used it in a more manipulative way, right? Is this a similar version but an energy type version of that, or a spiritual version of that? Because they were taking all types of data, right? I'm guessing you're just looking at specific.
It's very, very simple. We're not looking to kind of understand what your favorite shopping preferences are, et cetera. Why this was designed is to understand how much variability is tolerable. I don't think anybody has measured this. I don't think we're just looking at a couple of key areas. And of course, we're going to grow as we understand the data and we're going to evolve it. Though Cambridge Analytica was looking at how do we manipulate, how do we do this? Everything is intention. It's what's the intention that something's built with. Our intention is to create greater coherence, greater connection between people in mental health, therapeutic relationships, in coaching. Think of what we can do with teachers and students. I don't know about you, but there were some classes I just wouldn't show up because I hated the teacher so much. And what if it turned out, Casey, that there was just an energetic variability mismatch? And when we do meet the right teachers, we get lit up. We are there. We are present. What if we could use this to transform the education systems and transform what students go with what teachers? With everything going virtual right now, whether we're talking about young people in school or whether we're talking about, okay, who is the best thought leader for you to work with? Like Mind Valley. We would love to work with Mind Valley.
Yeah, Rishan, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, I'm very lucky. I know a lot of people who know him. We would love to do that because I even went on Mind Valley, but you do one class that you like, and then you're like, well, where do I go from here? How do I know? And you find one teacher and you're like, oh, well, I didn't like that as much as the first one, and you get churn.
Got it. So it's kind of like an energy rating. Not maybe energy's wrong word for it, but
motivating factors. I mean, it's variability. We built this entire thing, and it's all thanks to my co-founder, amazing Julian Adler, helped me to build and sell the last company, and Moon Cho came in, who's a brilliant, brilliant woman herself and thought leader on YouTube and influencer. And so we spent 8 months just going back and forth and testing and retesting and learning. That's it.
Well, that's that is life in itself, right? It's all an experiment, and you got to A/B test and keep going and iterating and making it better and better and better until the product sees the value. Till the market sees the value of your product, and then you can go live, right?
Yeah, and it's the difference. Some days, you know what, Casey, I'm not going to lie. I want to give up. For any of you entrepreneurs out there, I'm like, why am I doing this? It was so funny. So obviously I built and sold my first company in legal recruiting. And earlier this week, I was offered to give a talk to scholarship students, scholarship recipients on job hunting. That was like breathing, Casey. It's like, oh, let me teach you how to get your dream job, blah, blah, blah. It's like breathing for me. It's so easy.
Yeah, it's just
building a tech company. If you had told me 10, 20 years ago, you're going to be the CEO of a tech company that's going to build an algorithm that'll change the world, I'd be like, you're crazy.
Wow, you're definitely on the way. So right now, you're going through a raise. How much are you looking to raise right now?
Yeah, so we're raising $1 million right now, and we're really looking to collaborate with strategic people. That's the thing, is that we want to make sure that whoever's on board, that they are as invested in mental health and wellness and the good of the whole. Because at the end of the day, money is just money, and it does no good to scale if we aren't all aligned in our vision to help humanity.
Yeah, definitely all about the greater good. So just to wrap up then, where is the best place people can go to find out about you and health and wellness and optimal match and all those great things?
Yeah, so om.app. So
Okay.
om.app, as easy as it gets. We're very lucky to have gotten that domain, om.app.
All right, and we'll put the link down below so you can get to om.app very quickly. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you,
It's been a
Casey.
pleasure.
Yeah, what a pleasure.